math students, and welcome to your next lesson. Today we're going to be taking the integers that you learned about on Thursday and incorporating them into some word problems. So the plan for today is by the end of this lesson you'll be able to answer word problems using integer addition and subtraction. So a reminder, we learned in the last lesson that word integer means we're talking about positive and negative numbers. And so we're going to be using the math we learned with integers, specifically addition and subtraction, to help us answer word problems. Go ahead, pause now and think about, in that lesson we mentioned some places you would see integers and negative numbers. Do you remember where those places might be? The two we talked about in that last lesson on integers was temperature. You can get into the negatives with temperature, and money. So a lot of our actual story problems are going to end up being about temperature and money. You also see a couple other examples. The first place we're going to start, though, is with questions like these. So looking at these problems, it's kind of like just a math problem, but written out in words. So we'll be looking at these four examples to start off. This first one here says, what is the sum of -4 and 11? Now there's two things you're going to be doing for each of these. The first is just like the very first lesson we did on addition and subtraction word problems. I want you to represent this with your own equation. And then the second part is going to be actually answering it. In order to do this problem, there's a vocabulary word here we need to know, and that is this word here, sum. What does the word sum mean? Sum means addition. So that means when we go to write an equation, the equation we're going to be writing is what is -4 plus 11. The sum of -4 and 11 is what it's asking for, which means it's asking for what you get when you add these together. Now our equation could look something like this. I know on, what day was that? Wednesday, the very first lesson, we were putting sometimes question marks. Another thing you can use is a variable, which is a letter, if you've seen that before in math. If not, I'm okay with a question mark for now, but this is what we're trying to find, is what the answer is to that problem. Well, using what you learned in the last lesson, what is the answer to that problem? If you've got -4 and a positive 11, one way you can figure that out is with your integer rules, which says if the signs are different, you want to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So that would be a positive 7. The next one, what is 6 minus -7? Go ahead and try writing the equation down for that problem. This one can kind of be tricky sometimes. You've got to be careful with the word minus -7. We know minus is talking about that subtraction sign, the minus sign. So I want to write 6 minus, but what am I subtracting? I'm subtracting the number -7. So I need it to say minus and then -7. Now you can write it like that. The more common way to see it is parentheses around the -7 because you've got those two symbols there. But this right here would be our equation for the problem. We are trying to figure out what 6 minus -7 is. Now it's really important to get both of those minus signs there because we learned, I keep forgetting what day, we learned on Thursday, the last lesson, that those two subtraction signs is the same thing as an addition sign. When you're subtracting a negative, it's the same thing as adding. So in order to get the answer, I would go ahead and change it to an addition sign. So then we could say 6 plus 7, well I know that's 13. I'll circle the answer there too. There's 2 left. Go ahead, try writing the equation for this next one. What is positive 7 plus -8? If I go to write that down, positive 7 just looks like a normal 7. Plus, we know this is our plus sign, our addition sign. So 7 plus -8. Make sure you caught that word negative there. -8 would be written like this. Again, I'm using this parentheses just because we've got two signs here. It's the most common way to see it written. So we've got our equation. What do you think the answer is for that one? Well, Similarly to up here, we've got two numbers with different signs. We've got a positive and a negative. Different signs we want to subtract, and then keep the sign of the larger number. So I'm going to keep it negative. And that right there is our final answer. There's one left. What is negative 8 decreased by 2? What would the equation for that one look like? Well, we need to know what decreased by means. Decreased by is going to mean subtract, means it's going down, so subtraction. So I would want to write negative 8 minus 2. That is what we were trying to find. What is negative 8 minus 2? Well, in this problem, they are both negative. Both negative means they hit the same sign, so we want to add, and then keep that sign, keep that negative sign. So we get negative 10 as our answer. Remember, if you're really new to doing math with negative numbers, or if it's just been a while since you've done math with negative numbers, you can always go back to that number line just to help you confirm your answer is correct. So for example, something like this, I know I can put 0 in the middle of my number line. Negative 8 would be on this side, over with the negatives. And then if you're subtracting 2, it's getting even more negative. We're going backwards 2. So if I'm going backwards 2, it would be negative 9 and then negative 10. So you can always go back to that number line we talked about to help confirm, like, yes, negative 10 makes sense. These are 4 examples of some word problems you might see using integers. I'll go ahead and erase this, and then you'll have some to try yourself. That first one says, what is negative 4 plus negative 11? Go ahead and try that one. Well, negative 4 plus negative 11. They're both negative, so we're going to add and keep that negative sign, so negative 15. The next one says, what is the difference of negative 5 and 10? Go ahead and try that one. Difference means subtract. So we would want to write negative 5, and then I am subtracting our second number, which is 10. Looking at these, again, they're both negative. I got a negative 5 and a negative 10. Because they're the same sign, I want to add, and then keep that negative sign. It's negative 15 again. And then this last one says, what is negative 20 increased by 10? Go ahead and try that. Well, increased by is going to mean we want to add. So I want to do negative 20 plus 10. That's what we're trying to figure out. Looking at this problem, they have different signs. Different signs means I want to subtract and then keep that negative sign. Keep the sign of the bigger number. So we get negative 10 on that one. For these, it's really going to be important that we're feeling strong at doing the math with integers. Hopefully seeing some of these problems today with actual story problems and like real world context will help you understand better these addition and subtraction integer problems. If not, remember, please reach out to us if you're struggling with these. Like I said in the last video, negative numbers and doing math with negative numbers is something that a lot of our students struggle with a little bit when they start off here. Again, we've included it early on in the quarter so that you have a lot of time to practice it. So we've put up some opportunities for extra practice on our Google Classroom. But if you feel like you want more practice, remember we have tutoring every day of the week you can reach out to us for. Or we can always send you extra practice online if you feel like you just want some more practice to work with to get you more confident. This is the first part to the lesson. The second part is going to be looking at actual word problems, or some people call them story problems, but looking at negatives in a real world context. Now, as you are going through these, just some things to keep in mind. Just like we did in the very first lesson, feel free to underline important information. You know, math class, that's usually some of the numbers in the problem, but also some of those keywords I was doing in those last problems. Keywords like increase, decrease, difference, sum, add, subtract. All of those words that are going to help you figure out what you're trying to do in the problem. We're still going to be writing an equation to represent these, again, just like we did in that first lesson with addition and subtraction of positive numbers in word problems. Being able to look at a situation and represent it with an equation is something we're going to start. I mean, we started in this unit, but something we're going to start in this class that's going to continue on throughout all of your math classes. And then the last part is checking to make sure your answer makes sense. And we'll talk about this a little more when we look at our first problem, which is right now. So in this first problem here, we've got Steve has overdrawn his checking account by $27. His bank charged him a $15 fee for this. Then he quickly deposited $100. And the question is, what is his current balance? So I've gone ahead and circled our question, what is his current balance? But I'm gonna go through this again and start underlining some of the important information. So the first part, Steve has overdrawn his checking account by $27. That word overdrawn there is really important because it's telling us something about that $27. Do you know what overdraw means? Well, when you've overdrawn your account, that means you've taken out money that you just don't have. So that overdraw is telling us he did not have $27. That's money he didn't have. It's money he owes. So going back to what we said about negative numbers, what they mean in real life, if it's money you owe, it's telling us that 27 there is negative. It's money he doesn't have. After that, it says his bank charged him a $15 fee for this. If he's charged $15, again, that's money he has to pay. It's money he doesn't have. It's telling us again that $15 there is also negative. Then there's one last thing that happens. He quickly deposited $100. Deposit, that's money he had, right? That's money he put in his account. So that is going to be a positive number. One of the things I often recommend to students is just going through and indicating the sign of these numbers when you read the problem. It's really going to help you when you go to write that equation. So one thing we can do after reading through this is let's write that equation. We've got he started by overdrawing his checking account, $27. After that, his bank charged him that $15 fee, which is why we're subtracting $15. And then he's depositing $100. He's putting $100 into his account. And our question is trying to figure out what is his balance after he does all those things. We're trying to figure out what happens at the end. This right here is a perfect equation to represent this problem. When you go to figure out your answer, one thing you can do is estimate this. So usually in class I have people write down a number that they think is going to be close to our answer. Don't do any of the math yet. Just use this information to make a guess around where it's going to be. Estimates don't need to be perfect. It's just using kind of these numbers here and getting an idea of what the answer should look like. That's going to help us check to see does the answer we end up getting make sense. So go ahead, you're not doing any math, you're just looking at this information, make a guess around how much money you think it is. Some of the questions I normally ask in class when people are estimating is, well, do you think it's going to be more or less than $100? And usually what I hear is, well, less. He has $100, but he has to pay this stuff off, so our answer should be smaller than 100. Another question I might ask is, well, he started off negative. After he does all this, do you think he's still going to be negative, or do you think he's going to be positive? And students usually tell me, well, he's going to be positive because the money he owes is less than $100. You can look at 27 and 15 and say, well, 27 is like close to 30. 15, we could maybe like go up to 20, 30, 20, that's $50. He owes about $50. He's got $100, he's gonna have money left over, which means it'll be positive. Just based on that, that helps you get an idea of what the answer should look like. So if you end up doing all this math and you get a negative 162, that's gonna, if you've already talked through that and been like, we think it's gonna be, I'm gonna say around $50, positive $50. If we get something crazy like this, you guys have common sense. You know, you deal with stuff like this in your real lives. You can pause and say, well, that doesn't seem right to me, and then go back to check your math. Similarly, if you get something really large, a positive number like 162, again, one of the questions you might have asked yourself is, well, it's going to be less than $100, right? So this doesn't make sense. One last thing is another way you can think about this before you go to get your answer, maybe to help you estimate, is thinking about it back on that number line. So if I were to draw a number line for this, I like putting 0 in the middle. He's starting off negative 27, which is over here on our negative side. That may be very tiny for you, I'm sorry. He's losing another $15. That means he's going even further negative. So he's going back even more into the negative. And then the last thing, when he deposits 100, that's getting him back over onto this positive side here. So just kind of giving yourself like a visual, if you're a visual person, of what's going on in this problem will also help you with this estimate. We've talked enough though about what the answer might be. Let's go ahead and do the math. So I'm going to put those numbers over here. The first thing we want to do is go from left to right and put these two numbers together. So I see two negatives here. We know if the signs are the same, we want to add and then keep the sign of that larger number. So we get negative 42. Pause for a second and ask yourself, in this problem, what is negative 42? That number means something in this situation. What would that mean? Well, negative 42 is that total money he owes. He owes the $27 from overdrawing his account. He owes $15 for that fee. All we found here is that total money that he owes. That's why we added it, and it's also why it's a negative. Now this last part here, let's go ahead and put the negative 42 with the 100. What's that give us? Well, different signs means we want to subtract. When you subtract, you get a 58. And then keep the sign of your larger number. So I'm keeping it positive 58. Well, coming back to the story, we already said that negative 42 is the money he owes. All we're doing right here is saying, well, he had 100, so we're taking away that 42 he owes, and this is what we're left with. Now look, that estimate we made at the beginning, this is pretty close to our estimate. Our estimate wasn't supposed to be perfect, but if at the beginning you already said to yourself, I think it's gonna be around 50, when you get this is like a good pat on the back, like, yeah, that's around 50, I probably did the math right. Our answer is just gonna be his current balance. We're gonna say $58. You can give me the dollar sign, you can write the word dollar, but tell me something, 58 what? This is one example of an integer word problem that you might see. I've got one more and then I'm gonna give you one to try. This one also is about money. This one says, on Tuesday, the mailman delivers you a check for $15. A check for $15, the word each shouldn't be there, I'm sorry. Delivers you a check for $15 and 2 bills for $20 each. If you have a starting balance of $30, what is the ending balance? So going through this, the same way we did in that first problem, see if you can go through and just indicate what sign you think each of those numbers are. Our first number is this $15 here. You're getting a check for $15. Checks are money you're getting. It's money you're getting, that's gonna be a positive. What about that next number? What do you think? Well, it's a bill. When you get bills are things you pay, hopefully. You're paying your bills. So if it's something you're paying, that's money you're losing, money you don't have after you pay it, that means it'll be a negative. We got, if you had a starting balance of $30, what about that number? Starting balance of $30. Well, it's money you're starting with. It's money you have. So that would be positive. So right away, that's gonna help us with this next part, which is writing our equation. Once you've got all those signs down, now you know what numbers you're actually gonna be using in your equation. So let's go through it. The first thing in the story that they told us was he's getting a check for 15. We decided it was positive, so I can put it on the positive 15. The next thing we've got is a negative 20. What am I gonna write next? Well, I'm not gonna write minus 20, and there's a reason why. The reason is they said, and 2 bills for negative 20, I'm sorry, 2 bills for $20 each, and we decided that was a negative 20. So there's 2 options. You can say this is the first bill, and then this is the second bill. Or more often in class, students tell me, well, if it's 2 bills for $20 each, I know that's just a total of $40 in bills. I wish my bills were $20. But we can go ahead and say just minus 40 for those 2 bills. He owes a total of $40 with his bills. The last part says if you have a starting balance of $30, we've already said that's positive, so I can go ahead and just say plus 30. And there we go, that's our equation. The last part is just doing the math. Just like before, we're gonna wanna go from left to right to figure out what this equals. Go ahead and try. What do you think the answer is for this problem? Well, the first part, the 15 minus 40, those are different signs. We've got a positive and a negative, so I want to subtract. When you go to subtract these, if you can't do it in your head and you're doing it off to the side, when you go to write them on top of each other, you can't write it like this, because even though that's the order over here, when you're going to do that subtraction, you need the larger number on top. So instead, I'm gonna write 40 minus 15 to do my subtraction. That will give me 25. And then when I come back over here, I notice that 40 was the larger number and 40 was negative, so I have a negative 25. So negative 25 plus our 30. When I go to do this last part, again, different signs, we're subtracting, and that leaves me with 5. So the ending balance after you cash your check, you pay your bills, with that money you had, those $30, you are left with $5. Now this is one way I've seen students do this problem before, but there is another way sometimes students bring up in class. The question I've heard before in class is, well, it says you had a starting balance of 30. Shouldn't we put the 30 in front? Why did you put it at the end? It's saying start with 30. Well, what do you think? Did we do it wrong? What would you say to the student who says we should start with 30? Well, let's go ahead and try. Let's see what happens. If I were to say, yeah, you're right, we're starting with $30. What's happening then? Well, you get that check for $15, and then you're paying those 2 bills, which is a total of $40. What do you think? This looks different than this. Are they different or are they the same? Well, let's do the math and find out. 30 plus 15 is 45. We still have that minus 40. 45 minus 40, that's 5. They are the same. So one thing I like to point out to students at this point is the order of the numbers does not matter as long as the signs are consistent. And what I mean by that is, in both of these problems, we had a positive 15, a positive 15. We had a negative 40, we had a negative 40, and we had a positive 30 and a positive 30. So those numbers, notice how I'm using the sign in front of the number each time? Those numbers you can put in any order you want, and it's gonna work out to be the same amount. You just have to be careful with those signs. So helpful for information in the future. These are the 2 examples I had for you guys. Now, I've got 2 problems for you to try. The first one says, the temperature at noon on a winter day was 8 degrees. At midnight, the temperature had dropped 15 degrees. What was the temperature at midnight? Go ahead and write an equation and answer the question. All right. The second question says you owe $225 on your debit card. You make a $55 payment and then purchase $85 worth of clothes at Dillard's. What is the integer that represents the balance on the debit card? Go ahead and start off by finding an equation for this. This one I like to talk through. So you owe $225. That's telling you this is negative. You make a payment. You're making a $55 payment. That's money you have. So that's going to be positive. And then you're purchasing $85 more of clothes. That's money you're spending. That'll be negative. So when we go to write our equation, we've got the $225 you owed. You've got $55 that you're putting towards that debt. That's money you have that you're going to use to pay it off. But then you go and you spend more money again. And so we get that as our equation. Now that we can agree on an equation, go ahead and try answering the question. The question is, what integer represents the balance on your card? Well, when you go to do the math, these are different signs, so you would want to subtract those. When you subtract, that should leave you with negative 170. Negative because we're keeping the sign of the larger number. What that means in this story is that's money you owed, right? That's a lot of money you owe. If you're putting $55 to it, it means you're going to owe less, which is why the number has gone down. But it's negative because you still owe money, right? If you owe that much and you're only paying this much on that card, it's still going to be negative because you still owe some money. And then the second part, when you're looking at this, they're both negative, so you're going to add them together. When you add, you get negative 255. It's gone up because you've just spent more money. So all that damage control you did, you're spending more money, which means your debt is increasing, right? We're getting a larger negative number. So our answer, what integer represents the balance on the card? We're going to write negative $255. I'm still using that negative sign to show that's money you owe. And then the $255 to show how much money you owe. Hopefully those two make sense. There's one last example we're going to look at. And that's this question here. Instead of talking about money or temperature, we've got an example of the third place you might see negative numbers, which is this situation here. The question is asking us to find the difference in height between the top of a hill, 124 feet high, and the bottom of a lake, 74 feet below sea level. Now, the first time I do this with students, I always like to draw a picture to kind of help show what information they're giving us. So what do we have here? Well, we've got a hill. So you ready for this artistic masterpiece? There's my hill. And what do we know about the hill? We know the hill is 124 feet high. If I wanted to label my beautiful picture of a hill, I would say right here at the top, they're telling me is 124 feet high. What number is at the bottom of the hill? Well, sometimes students want to tell me 79, but that's not the bottom of the hill, that's the bottom of the lake. If you're measuring something, so for example, if I was measuring myself, if I tell you I am 5 feet 6 inches tall, that's the number at my head. What number is down at the bottom of me? What number is down by my feet? Well, 0. So 124 is up here, 0 is at the bottom. If you're measuring the length of something, you're starting from 0, and then we're just measuring straight up. So continuing with my beautiful drawing, it's saying we've got a hill that's 124 feet high. We've got a lake that goes down to 79 feet below sea level. Well, ready for this? Here's the lake. It's so beautiful. And they're telling me the bottom of the lake is 79 feet below sea level. Okay, well, I know the bottom of the lake is right here. What number should go here? Now, if you're saying 79, pause for a second. I know that the number 79 is somewhere between these two. Kind of think of this as like a number line. Positive 79 would be somewhere right here. But we're not up here. We're not halfway up the hill. We're down here under the water. What number would be down here? What number would be past 0? Negative 79. Right here, we would label that height as negative 79. specifically because it is below sea level. When you are measuring things, the height of things, most of the time since we're on land, we're on the surface, everything is above sea level. But I'm from Florida, and so there's actually some parts of Florida where your house is like at sea level or below sea level. If you're like in the middle and kind of living in a ditch, I guess. So the point of this is, if it's below sea level, that is telling you that this number is negative. We would label it as a negative 79. So coming back to what the question is asking, they're asking us the difference in the height. They're asking us how far apart are these two things. I want to go back to what we did with that first problem. If you wanted to take a guess or an estimate, how far apart are these two things? What could you estimate? Well, what I notice is I know from here to here is 124, right? We already said 0 is here and 124 is here. So this is 124, but we're going even further. What's that mean about the number? It's got to be more than 124. So if I was guessing, I'd say, well, this is like about 120, this is about 80. I'd probably guess around 200, but definitely more than 124 because you're going even further. We're trying to figure out from here, let me put it in red. We're trying to do from here all the way down to the bottom of that lake. So when it comes to the math, what do you think we're going to have to do with these numbers? Well, I need this part plus this part to find that total. The question students might ask is, well, difference, we learned earlier that difference means subtract. When we go to write this equation, if you're trying to use a subtraction sign, what are you doing? You're finding the difference between 124 minus that negative 79. And we learned, not yesterday, we learned on Thursday or in the last lesson that when you're subtracting a negative, that is the same thing as adding. So that is just like another way to see why you would be adding right there, because you're trying to find that total distance. Our final answer, 124 plus 79. If I go to add those, we get 13 there, 10 there, 203. Remember that estimate we made? We said it was going to be around 200. It's there. So our final answer, question is, what is the difference in height? We could say the difference is 203. What are we measuring the height with? 203 feet. All right, that is my last example. There is one here for you to try. I'll clean off the board. The question is, if it is 75 degrees Fahrenheit in Honolulu and negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit in Juneau, what is the temperature difference between the two cities? You should have 4 options. Go ahead and try that now. Nice. If you struggled with this one, similar to that last one, we were finding the difference, which means we're subtracting. Finding the difference between Honolulu at 75 degrees and Juneau at negative 25 degrees. Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding, and that is where that 100 comes from. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson and you're feeling better about integers and integer word problems. Thank you so much for watching.